Hello, and welcome back to Felony Spectator. I am your host, Heather. On today's episode, we're discussing the case of Sean Doughtry, who was a 12-year-old boy that some believe died of very unusual circumstances. I started off wanting to do this case because I felt like it needed more awareness and people to fight for the family. I wanted it shared and the word spread. And this is mostly because of how everything is reported and what the family is saying about the investigation. At the end, I will show you what the police think and how everything has been explained away. Let me know if you agree after everything that you hear. Sean Doughtry was in the 6th grade at the time of his death, and he seemingly loved life. He loved his family, which was a blended family consisting of Sean being the second oldest, and he had a mom, Ramona, stepdad, Jared, an older sister, Maria, who was 16, and 2 younger half-brothers who were 5 and 2. His 79-year-old grandma also lived in the home. Ramona and Jared were both lieutenant colonels in the Air Force and were able to provide a wonderful life for their family. The family lived on Sandalwood Lane in Yorktown, Virginia. This street has really nice, big, beautiful homes. Sandalwood Lane is a neighborhood with an HOA. It's known for its pristine lawns, it's very well kept, and was seemingly safe. So much so that the family never thought to install a security system and even occasionally left their door unlocked. The family was pretty new to the neighborhood, but due to COVID, they didn't really have a chance to make many close friends. The family itself was a really tight-knit family, so it wasn't an issue. It was just that people often kept to themselves during those COVID times. Even though they were relatively new to Sandalwood Lane, the family was moving once again and had recently sold the home. This was because Ramona was promoted to a new position at the Pentagon. While moving might upset kids, Ramona remembers that Sean was really excited. He couldn't wait to tell his friends at school that his mom was going to work at the Pentagon. He was really proud of her, and this change wasn't really scary for him at all. Sean was also in high spirits because they recently returned from a vacation on a Disney cruise. The family had so much fun at Disney that they booked another Disney trip for August. Sean was ecstatic. He loved Disney. And Disney was a reward for the kids because they were doing really well in school. Sean himself had straight A's, and he excelled at reading, and his reading level was way beyond his classmates. Teachers also loved him. He was generally a really good kid and by all accounts, happy. On April 14th, 2022, Sean got home from school just after 3 p.m. Via Sean's grandmother, who also lived in the home, was watching Sean's 2-year-old brother. The 5-year-old and his dad were actually in another town at a medical appointment. So it was just grandma and the 2-year-old in the house. But she had gotten a call from the doctor's office requesting that she come in for an EKG. So as soon as Sean entered, she needed to go as she was in a rush. The 2-year-old brother was on the couch sleeping, so she asked that Sean look after him while she went for her EKG. Sean didn't mind at all. He loved babysitting, he was very independent and trustworthy. So Sean would sit down on the couch and start reading a book while she exited the home. And from what I understand, Ramona rushed home from work to pick up Grandma for the EKG, but she didn't have a chance to say hi to Sean, so his mother called from the car. Ramona reminded Sean about his chores. Sean told her that he had a bit of homework to do, but he also wanted to do some gaming. Fortnite was one of his favorite games, and he always looked forward to playing online. I think at this point he was just told to look after his brother, but his mom would call him again soon. So Sean did do his homework. He submitted it online, which included submitting a selfie. And this was registered at 3:09 p.m. Ramona would call home again and tell Sean that he needed to wake up his little brother because he had been napping for almost 2 hours. She was really worried that he might have a hard time sleeping at night if he continued to nap on the couch. Ramona then suggested that they get up, have a snack, and watch a movie together. Then this call was cut short because Sean was actually on the toilet, which they both laughed about. Ramona then called a third time around 3:27 p.m. And this time she suggested, instead of both of them watching a movie, that Sean could do some video gaming with his friends if he set his brother up with the iPad. Sean was happy with this compromise because he really wanted to play Fortnite. Ramona would let him know that the iPad was charging upstairs and also reminded him that he needed to do his chores first. And again, Sean was okay with all of this and was excited to get online gaming with his friends. So now it's assumed that after this phone call, he started to complete his chores and prepare a snack for his little brother. Meanwhile, Maria, Sean's older sister, had a tennis match after school, so she came home much later than Sean. When she finally arrived, she too was in a bit of a rush because she was meant to go to a lacrosse game with her boyfriend AJ. And AJ's mom was on the way to pick her up. So Maria needed to get inside and get ready quickly. But the front door was locked and nobody was answering the door. Maria would call her mom, and Ramona said that Sean was home and to just keep knocking because he was probably gaming upstairs. Maria did, and she also called and texted 3 times around 4:50 p.m. She would finally go around the back of the house to see if she could get in through the back door. The first thing Maria would notice was something hanging from the swing set, which stopped her in her tracks. As she got closer, she would notice that it was a person with a bag on their head. This was obviously frightening, but she also realized that this person wasn't very big. And whoever this was facing outward, so not towards the house. And they were also not moving. So Maria looked around confused and then locked eyes with a landscaper who was supposed to be mowing the lawn at the neighbor's house. He was standing there looking at her equally confused, or so she thought. She would call out, "Hello?" and get no response. As she got closer, she suddenly realized it was her brother, Sean. Maria would run up and get Sean down off the swing set by lifting what appeared to be a shoelace over his head. Then, with the help of a 911 dispatcher, she performed CPR for approximately 6 minutes before the EMT arrived and took over. When the EMTs came, they would have to move a patio chair off to the side of the playground. They also looped the swings up over the top bar to get them out of the way before trying to resuscitate Sean. The first thing they would notice was that Sean's arms were very tightly secured to his sides by a belt. Now, this belt that was around his arms was said to be buckled so tightly that his arms were turning blue. The EMTs had to remove this belt to use the AED machine, which administers electric shocks in hopes to restart your heart. But the belt was so tight that it was actually difficult for them to remove. Strangely, Sean was also dressed in men's clothing right down to his underwear. Everyone would later learn that these clothes were his stepfather, Jared's. Sean was not wearing shoes, and his glasses were not on his face but broken nearby. And this swing set isn't very tall either, so Sean could easily touch the ground. But instead, his feet were out behind him. You could also clearly see the bottoms of his feet, which appeared to be somewhat clean. This was all very confusing because Sean was supposed to be watching his 2-year-old brother. Sean loved his brother. He protected him. He loved making him laugh, and his parents couldn't believe that Sean would just leave his brother like that. When Ramona came home, she found the youngest son seemingly exhausted in the living room. She can only assume that he had been left to cry until he was too tired to cry anymore. She remembers that he was almost doll-like. Ramona had also ran outside through the front door, which was still locked. She ran to her neighbors who were standing outside watching the commotion of the emergency vehicles. She yelled out, "What happened? Did you see what happened?" The neighbors all said no. A landscaper who was standing with one of the neighbors mumbled something like, "I don't know who did it." Ramona then ran over to another neighbor who was mowing their lawn, and they too said that they didn't see anything. This seemed a bit surprising to her because their fence was only a 3-foot tall picket fence. How was it that these people who were working outside saw nothing? Sean's mom just couldn't fathom that Sean would do this. Their last conversation seemed so normal. They had discussed that his homework was finished and submitted. He even acknowledged that he was going to give his brother a snack and was excited to log into Fortnite. There was no reason why Sean would do this. Sean was going to give his brother a snack because he had actually taken a jar of peaches, which is his brother's favorite, out of the pantry and put some in a bowl. But that snack was left on the counter untouched. It also appeared as though Sean had started his chores, which was to empty all the garbage cans in the home and take it outside. Sean had gone upstairs and emptied the bathroom garbage bins, and he gathered the garbage from the kitchen as well. But that chore was also never completed as the garbage bags were found by the back door along with his Crocs. Ramona and Jared immediately thought an intruder came into the home and interrupted him. That would be the only explanation. They don't think for 1 second that Sean would just stop what he was doing, change into his stepfather's clothes, and then take his own life. Police, on the other hand, felt that nothing was suspicious after they checked the home and concluded that Sean had actually ended his own life. The police asked them questions like, has Sean ever tried to harm himself before? Had they ever seen marks on his neck before? They also asked if he had problems at school. His parents said that he was happy, and Ramona couldn't recall anything out of the ordinary. Ramona insisted that none of this made any sense. Even how Sean went about going outside didn't make sense to her. Sean was never barefoot in the home, ever. In fact, no one in their house was ever barefoot. They always wore shoes inside their house, which I guess is typical of a lot of American households. You wear your shoes inside. Sean was also particular about this, and he didn't even like going barefoot. He loved his Crocs and wore them all the time. April is also springtime in Virginia, and Ramona thought the grass in their backyard was a bit swampy. She thought there should be mud or at least dirt for Sean to have walked through, but his feet were clean. So this boy who hated being barefoot took off his shoes and walked through the muddy yard, but didn't have any dirt at the bottom of his feet. Ramona couldn't make sense of this. Ramona decided to talk to the 2-year-old. Now, let's remember, 2-year-olds often don't process things the same way as adults. But what he said was that a friend was chasing Sean in the house. Now, Sean didn't have any friends over that they were aware of. He was planning on gaming online with his friends after getting his brother a snack and doing some chores. Fortnite, the game Sean was meant to play, hadn't even been logged into yet. So was Sean being chased, or did he just run through the house? I don't believe the police spoke to the 2-year-old, just Ramona. Then there was the matter of how Sean was found. How did Sean tie a belt so tightly around his arms at the waist with a bag on his head tied to the swing set? How do you even do that? And it's thought that the string that was used was also more around his chin than his neck. Maria thinks it seemed more like he was propped up rather than actually hanging. There was just something really weird about how he was. The medical examiner's report said he was, quote, partially suspended by a shoelace-type string, end quote. Apparently, there was also no signs that Sean was assaulted. Virginia doesn't release medical examiner's reports to anyone other than next of kin, so I wasn't able to see it or request it. I am curious to know more about what was found, though. Was there any other injuries present? What did the injury look like around his neck? Especially if Maria thinks that it was around his chin and not his neck. And did the medical examiner do a thorough enough examination? Ramona did go to the hospital when Sean was rushed there by the EMTs. After he was pronounced dead, she was allowed to be with him to say goodbye. She remembers that she went over and kissed his forehead. She held his hands and tried to take Sean in one last time. To her, his face seemed peaceful. She doesn't remember redness or damage to his eyes or face. He wasn't puffy, he wasn't blue, he just looked like Sean. Now, when someone hangs themselves, their face sometimes changes. Their eyes will be bloodshot or swollen, sometimes their face is discolored, but Ramona doesn't remember seeing any of that. With that said, other types of strangulation could have the same result, and the eyes can become bloodshot. But again, she doesn't remember Sean looking like that. Ramona does remember that she was holding his hand and she noticed blood, a very small amount between his 4th and 5th finger on his left hand. Ramona took a photo of it on her phone as evidence of the blood for the investigation. She also noticed the very distinct marks on his wrists from the belt. But according to Ramona, the medical examiner doesn't mention these marks at all. As far as I could find, nothing came of this. Ramona also noticed for the first time that Sean was wearing her husband's shirt. She was very alarmed and asked who put this on him. The investigators then removed Ramona from the room and told her that it was an active crime scene. Sadly, her goodbye would be cut short. Jared, Sean's stepdad, also insisted that Sean loved life, but police were continually implying that this was self-inflicted. Jared also confirmed that Sean would never go into his room and put on his clothes. That just made absolutely no sense. and it was Jared who finally realized what the bag was that Sean had on his head. It was a silver gray drawstring bag with Shuey written on it in black, and this was Jared's motorcycle helmet bag. The bag would have been in the garage along with some other items set aside for goodwill. Jared remembered there was actually 2 drawstring bags, so he checked the garage and noticed one bag was missing, the gray one that was on Sean's head, but the second bag was missing its drawstring. Now remember, Sean was found suspended by a string, so this is where it actually came from. Now, what they thought was odd about this string was that in the garage, they had lots and lots of rope and military-grade paracords. Both Jared and Ramona were in the military and have acquired a lot of things over the years, and Sean knew this. Sean knew that if he needed rope, it was very easily found in one of the many bins they had in the garage. Another thing they noticed was some of the boots in the garage were untied and seemed as though someone was attempting to pull the laces out. So did someone want a shoelace and then change their mind when they saw the drawstring bags? And why a flimsy shoelace? Sean was also the kind of kid who loved wearing ties. He had bow ties, he had neckties. Jared too had neckties in his room as well. So why go to the garage for a shoelace when he had lots of other options available to him, from rope to neckties? Now, Sean was 12, so maybe he wasn't thinking about neckties or that a necktie could be suitable for this task, but rope at a minimum would have made more sense. Now, while in the kitchen later in the evening after the incident, Ramona was going to gather the trash bags that were left out. First, she opened the trash drawer to make sure they were emptied. And the trash drawer is a drawer in the kitchen that the garbage bins are in. So when we say she opened the trash drawer, it was her looking in the garbage bins. She noticed that Sean had replaced the old bags with new bags. Strangely, the new bags had blue handles. Now, Ramona was the person who did the shopping for the home. She knows that the kitchen bags she buys have red handles. She also noticed 2 other bags on the floor, all ripped up, also with blue handles. To be sure, she would walk around the home only to find red-handled bags. She had no idea where they came from. And why were 2 all ripped up on the floor? Other things that Ramona noticed that evening was the heat was set to 85 degrees. And this is much hotter than they usually have it set for. So did Sean do this, and why? So Ramona would turn down the heat and proceed to go into her room and see that Sean's underwear was right there in the middle of the floor. Ramona actually got gloves and a Ziploc bag and grabbed his underwear for the police. This was so strange to her. Sean would never take his underwear off in her room. But remember that Sean was found wearing Jared's clothing, including his underwear. But why? The following morning, Jamie, AJ's mother, AJ is Maria's boyfriend, she had come over with food for the family and decided to help out by cleaning up as well. She was sweeping the kitchen when she noticed a large handprint on the back door's window. This was also a big handprint and pretty high up on the window on the inside of the house. This seemed very out of place to her, so she called Ramona to see it. And she agreed that it was an adult's print, and they also noticed a weird residue of some sort. So the hand was not clean when it came in contact with the window. It was a very dirty hand. So Ramona called investigators to let them know of this handprint. Investigators would come, and Ramona showed them as well as discussed the odd trash bags. Investigators took note of this, and they lifted fingerprints from this large hand. They also talked to her about Sean's last day in school. They showed her a surveillance video from the school of Sean walking down the hall with some of his friends. This video confirmed what Sean was wearing that day, and it also matched with the clothes he was wearing in his selfie that he submitted for homework. He had on a jacket and a flannel shirt, another shirt, and jean shorts. Strangely, when Ramona looked around for the clothes, she would only find the jacket and the flannel, not the second shirt or his shorts. Those items are completely missing. The handprint luckily came back good, but nothing matched in the system. So whoever's print this is unknown to police. Sean's family also felt that Sean's glasses were prematurely returned to the family. An officer had returned them the following Monday morning, and this was very confusing. To Sean's family, these were evidence. Sean's glasses were broken and missing a lens. Investigators apparently don't know where the lens is, and when Ramona asked if they were tested, she was told, of course. But there's actually no record of the testing at all. Unfortunately, now it's too late. They've been compromised. After the weekend of Sean's passing, Sean's parents were gearing up to figure out what they needed to do to help solve this crime. To them, it was a crime and Sean needed justice. What they didn't know was that the school had a representative from the sheriff's office come and speak to Sean's classmates. This was to inform them of Sean's passing. The representative wanted to discuss how sometimes people take their own lives and the feelings of sadness and grieving. A grief counselor was also available to help navigate this confusing time with the students. Sean's teachers did express their shock when this happened because Sean had handed in his homework and he was in a great mood. Now someone was at the school implying that Sean took his own life. Sean's parents didn't like how police had quickly gone to the school and basically finalized what they thought had happened. Investigators assured Sean's parents that they were still working on the case, but it sure didn't feel like it. The neighbors started to become concerned and they were calling the police station, all to be told that it was an isolated incident and they had nothing to worry about. Sean's family would also learn that the neighbors were never asked for security footage, and in fact, police didn't even canvass the neighborhood at all when it happened. There is about 6 homes with backyards that all look into Sean's backyard, so it was weird that police never once thought to ask any of them if they saw anything. A Facebook group was formed by the neighbors, and people started to share their security footage in hopes to find some answers because they all couldn't believe what they heard. Unfortunately, those who had cameras didn't find anything usable, and some people's cameras weren't even working or turned on. Now, remember, there was also landscapers working next door, mowing the grass, cleaning up the backyard at the same time Sean presumably took his life. With only having 3-foot fences, it's very confusing that they didn't see anything. These landscapers were never further questioned or asked to provide fingerprints. It's said that ER doctors who first evaluated Sean wrote that Sean had a history of suicidal ideations, which is odd. The medical examiner, however, said no known depression or thoughts of suicide. No note was found at the scene indicating any reason for what happened, and Sean did not have a history of depression and was very happy. So how did the ER doctors come up with Sean being depressed and suicidal? The only thing that happened that his parents could think of was a bullying incident at school. It was 5 months prior in December of 2021. The incident involved 3 girls who were just basically teasing Sean. It wasn't a situation where a bully was beating him up, it was just mean girls. Now I know girls can be pretty harsh, but the situation was resolved. Sean's iPad and phone were taken as well, but nothing was ever found to indicate that he was depressed. There wasn't online searches of death or how-tos. He also didn't have a bully messaging him or sending him anything online either. 4 weeks after the incident, the dresser was finally tested for prints at the insistence of the family. Unfortunately, nothing came back conclusive as there wasn't any usable prints. But had investigators taken prints right away, would they have been usable? Unfortunately, no trace DNA was found on the belt that had secured Sean's arms down to his sides. And it was only Sean's trace DNA on the drawstring that was around his neck. Now, everything you've heard so far has been according to Sean's family, and a lot of other YouTubers are reporting this case the same way. I have to agree, if this is correct information, this doesn't look good and is very suspicious. In an unprecedented move, York County Sheriff's Office did a media release to defend themselves against the family's accusations that the investigation wasn't being taken seriously. It's about 10 minutes long, but I'm going to show you the media release now.
Recent statements have caused concern in the community that the death of a 12-year-old on April the 14th, 2022 has not been fully investigated by the Sheriff's Office and that there may be a killer in our area that poses a threat. Nothing could be further from the truth. It has been the long-standing policy of the York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office to not release information relating to cases of suicide, particularly those cases that involve children. We do everything within our power to preserve the privacy of the grieving family. We take these matters very seriously, evaluate all evidence, and consider all possibilities. The York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office is aware of a recent social media site created to provide the public with theories surrounding the death of this 12-year-old. Much of the information being posted to this social media site is opinion innuendo, and fabrication, which is not consistent with the evidence that was collected by Sheriff's Office investigators during their investigation. Once that evidence was collected, it was submitted to the Department of Forensic Science for evaluation and later to the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. By law, in Virginia, it is the Chief Medical Examiner's responsibility to determine the manner and cause of death which they, the Chief Medical Examiner's Office, determined to be a suicide. In addition, the Sheriff's Office met with the family on multiple occasions and gave them the opportunity to discuss this investigation. Additionally, an offer was made to have a group meeting after the findings of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office that would include the family, members of the York-Wacotian Sheriff's Office, and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. As of this date, the family has not expressed interest in scheduling the meeting. Instead, they chose to post this video publicly. There were several key points that were made in this video that the Sheriff's Office will address. First, in the video, the mother said, "They have told me a few times that they really don't know how to investigate this kind of murder case because it's really complicated." The implication being we, the York-Wacotian Sheriff's Office. That statement is absolutely not true and was never made to this mother. Our investigators are recognized in the Hampton Roads area as professional, caring, competent major crimes investigators. They have investigated and solved numerous cases that include homicides, suicides, rapes, and robberies. They have several decades of investigative experience within the division. The investigation divisions consist of graduates of the Virginia Forensic Science Academy, which has certified them as crime scene experts. Along with processing the scene and interviewing witnesses and the family, investigators interviewed a significant number of people to include surrounding neighbors, lawn care personnel, school officials, friends of the 12-year-old, and other community members. The results of these initial interviews did not identify any potential suspects. Also during the course of this investigation, the family provided information on individuals they believe may be involved in the case. Their suspicions were based on people that they merely believed to be in the area at the time of the incident. These individuals were all located, interviewed, and ruled out as persons of interest by Sheriff's Office investigators. The evidence collected and documentation shows many discrepancies in the version that was put forth on the family's page. The videos and photos you see on their social media site are not from the actual scene. They have been fabricated. First, the video of the man walking in front of their house is from 1 month after the incident, not the day of the incident. 2, the blood spatter image depicted in the video was not from the scene. However, we went back to the home on May 20th, 2022 at the request of the family. During that visit, the mother pointed out a red stain on the wall in the upstairs area of the home. Investigators photographed that stain on that date. Later, investigators reviewed the photographs that were taken on April the 14th, 2022, the day of the tragedy, and that stain was not present on that wall on April the 14th, 2022. In the mother's video, she states that her 2-year-old child witnessed the events that occurred in the house. During a recorded interview on April the 14th, 2022, between the mother and Sheriff's Office investigators, she stated when she left the house that afternoon to take her mother to an appointment, the child was asleep. When she returned home after the tragedy had been discovered, she is quoted as saying to the Sheriff's Office investigator, quote, "Thank God he was still asleep," meaning the 2-year-old. The information that she stated in her video about the 2-year-old has never been disclosed to the Sheriff's Office. In the mother's video, she states there was mud in the backyard, even refers to it as swampy. And she noted that there was no dirt on the 12-year-old's feet. Images from the day of the incident on April the 14th show that the grass was not wet and the yard was not swampy. There have been many statements on this website regarding the alleged staging of the scene. The photo of the backyard displayed on the social media site shows a swing set and a chair. It's important to note that the swings that are wrapped over the top post of the swing set and the chair were moved by York County Fire and Life Safety personnel in order to create enough space to render life-saving measures. The chair was moved from its original location under the swing by fire and life safety personnel where the 12-year-old was hanging, to the front of the swing set, and the swings were moved to provide workspace. Our investigation determined that the chair was originally located on the deck at the rear of the home and was moved to the swing set area. Also during the course of our investigation, DNA samples were collected from the cord that the 12-year-old was found suspended from. This cord was not a shoestring. It came from a motorcycle helmet bag that belonged to the stepfather that had been previously located in the garage. The 12-year-old's DNA was the only DNA found on this cord. Specifically, the DNA swabs were taken from the knot placed in that cord, and the only DNA on that knot belonged to the 12-year-old. In the video, there's an allegation that members of the YPSO, the York Poquoson Sheriff's Office, washed blood from the 12-year-old. At no point did any member of the Sheriff's Office clean or remove any blood from the scene or the child. At the hospital, investigators placed bags over the 12-year-old's hands prior to him being transported to the medical examiner's office. This is common practice to prevent the loss of any potential trace evidence. Based on the fact that the family was telling us that neighbors had information that they were providing to the family about possible suspects, our investigators went back to interview those neighbors, and none provided any additional information or new investigative leads. There is a statement in the mother's video about the unusual location of the 12-year-old's underwear. The clothing that the 12-year-old was wearing when he was located that day belonged to his stepfather, to include the stepfather's shirt, pants, belt, and stepfather's underwear. The 12-year-old's underwear were found in the same room where his stepfather's clothes were kept. In the video, the mother states that someone from the York Poquoson Sheriff's Office sent her a text that stated, quote, "Time to move on." To our knowledge, that statement was never made. We have done some research and have not been able to locate a text message telling the family to move on. The only text similar to this was a text between the investigator and the mother, where the mother states to the investigator, quote, "It is time to heal." Several theories were presented to the Sheriff's Office investigators by the family. The first theory provided to the family about what happened that day stated that they believed that this was a burglary, and during the burglary, their 12-year-old was sexually assaulted and murdered. However, Sheriff's Office investigators found no evidence of an intruder, and laboratory and medical evaluations of forensic evidence sent to the laboratory found no signs of sexual assault. The second theory presented by the family was that this was carried out as a military-type operation directed at them, the family, due to their rank in the United States Air Force. And finally, they identified 3 different people based solely on speculation that they frequented the neighborhood. All 3 of these people were located, and Sheriff's Office investigators eliminated them as persons of interest in this incident. We did not address every inconsistency or fabrication from the social media site. We conducted a thorough, professional, and exhaustive investigation. There is nothing whatsoever to indicate that there is a killer in our community. As I stated at the beginning of this video, it is our policy not to discuss these issues in public, particularly when they involve children. However, the social media site has caused great concern within our community. We still extend an invitation to the family to meet with members of this agency and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to discuss the results of the autopsy and our investigation.
As you can see, a lot of the information the family has reported has been shot down by the sheriff. He claims they took lots of evidence, interviewed the neighbors, and everything has come back pointing to Sean taking his own life. It's interesting that it's so different, but without seeing the reports personally, it's hard to know what's true. He does come off as very defensive, though. My thoughts? Now, I'm not so naive to think that kids don't take their own lives. When I was in grade 5, a classmate took their life, and it was very difficult for everyone to understand. We were so young and it was so confusing because what reason would a seemingly happy child want to end their life? Now, kids aren't always the most logical and they're not the best at talking about their feelings or sometimes even understanding their feelings. Parents often miss things too, so it happens. Now, I don't know Sean, obviously, but maybe he did have some conflicting feelings or issues that his parents weren't aware of. With that said, the events in which Sean would have had to go through to end his life don't make much sense to me. And kids are weird, they don't always make sense, but everything seems overly complicated for a 12-year-old. Like a bag on his head, his dad's clothes, a belt around his waist. Now, I don't know, it just seems like a lot for a 12-year-old to do. The police believe it was a sudden decision, and maybe that's accurate. He was basically home alone and knew someone would be home soon to take care of his brother. Maybe he was playing dress up in his dad's clothes and something made him sad. But again, something just seems really off about this case. I also find it strange that the landscapers were working away and didn't notice Sean. He would have had to bring a bag, a string, a belt outside. Then he would have had to carry a chair from the patio to the swing set, kneel on the chair, tie the drawstring around his neck, put the bag on his head. Then with this bag on his head, he cinches the belt around his arms extremely tightly to his sides. Now he has to kick the chair away and nobody sees any of this. On the other hand, if a landscaper or an intruder came, if it was an intruder like Sean's parents think, it's also confusing as well because there was no other injuries on Sean that we're aware of. He wasn't assaulted at all. So why would an intruder go into the house, make him put on his stepdad's clothes, and then stage this suicide? That also doesn't make sense. I'm going to put a link in the comments for a petition to reopen this case. If you think this case is strange and you want to help out the family, also pass this along to others as well. Please let me know what your theory is in the comments. Is something else going on here? Was it an intruder? Or did Sean plan all of this? I really want to know what you think. Thanks again for joining me here at Felony Spectator, and we will see you again soon.